Good evening. Yesterday we celebrated Lag BaOmer, and I wanted to take, even though it's over, because I did not speak last week, I wanted to say one or two things, just a flavor of Lag BaOmer and what it is. The fact is that one of the biggest items of celebration on Lag BaOmer are the maduros, are the fires. Why do we do it? And it's brought from Kadmonim and from Mekubolim that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, on the day he was nifter, he said many chidushim of Rozen D'Oraisa. He was Megala. He revealed lots of secrets of the Torah. And while he was doing that, it continued the hours of the day and it went into the night. But there was no shokah hachama, there was no sunset. So 3 or 4 hours after it should have been pitch black and dark outside, it wasn't. It was still light. And to celebrate the fact that it was still light so late into the night, that we have the maduras, which provide such light, where after it's lit, it looks in the area of the madura like it's daytime. You could see everything, and there's no problem. Now, a few days before, 4 days before Lag BaOmer was Pesach Sheni. Pesach Sheni, we know that it's the yahrzeit of Reb Meir Balanes, the famous Reb Meir, the Tana. Reb Meir was buried in Tveria standing up because he didn't want to take the few minutes to stand up by Tchias HaMesim to get out. So he asked that he be buried in Tveria standing, so that he wouldn't have to waste the 2 or 3 minutes. Zechuso Yogein Oleinu. I wanted to talk more about it, but it's already from last week. So, Be'ezus Hashem, at some other occasion, we will fill that in. Now, Lag BaOmer itself, Rabbi Akiva lost 24,000 Talmidim, and the Arizal says that the mountain where he is buried in Tveria, at the top of that mountain, that whole mountain is where the 24,000 were buried. And therefore the Arizal said someone should not have a house or a business on that mountain, because under that mountain it's a big Beis HaChaim with all 24,000. Now if you'll go to Eretz Yisrael, to Tveria, you will see there are a couple, not many, but a couple houses, and that was people who were not from. And they chose to buy something and to live there. But Charedim will not live on that mountain at all. And Rabbi Akiva, we know, was the biggest of the big, and he understood the chashivas, and there's a whole debate if the 5 Talmidim that he continued with, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, those 5, if they were there before the 24,000 died, or they first came around to Rabbi Akiva and there's a very big debate, both sides of the fence on that issue, but he took the 5 and went south and he rebuilt everything from that. Rabbi Akiva himself, we know that Moshe Rabbeinu said 1,600 years before, when Moshe Rabbeinu lived, don't give the Torah through me, give it through Rabbi Akiva, because Moshe Rabbeinu, we know, say the Mekubolim, he was Mekabel the Torah from the world of Bria, which is from Baruch Hu Tol Shemona Esrei. Rabbi Akiva had the Torah and taught the Torah to his Talmidim from the Olam of Atzilus, which is the highest of the 4. And that's how the Arizal Taiches Shalom Noagu Kavod Zeh Lazeh that they weren't respectful. Now, how could it be they were Tanoim, that they were not respectful? Would we believe that the Chofetz Chaim was not respectful with his Chaverim? But the answer, they say, is that Rabbi Akiva taught the Torah from the Olam of Atzilus, and he wanted his Talmidim Bechavrusa to give over to each other at that same level. They couldn't, and they had close hanefesh. That's what they died from. Because the word kavod, zelozeh, the word kavod is Begematria 32, and that's the Lamed Beis Nesivas HaChochma of the Olam of Atzilus. We know there's Nun Shari Bina, that we, like we say on Pesach, that if they fell into the 50th, there's Nun Shari Bina, they were at the 49th level, and had they waited longer, they would have fallen in and couldn't go out. That was the Olam HaBriya, but it wasn't the Olam Atzilus. That was a step higher where Rabbi Akiva was, and we see how big he was that Moshe Rabbeinu said to Kodesh Baruch Hu when he told him that I want you to give over the Torah 50 days after they leave Mitzrayim. He said, me? Give it through Rabbi Akiva. He's going to be masik all the tagim, those little lines on top of the letters in the Sefer Torah, and darshan bushel baskets of halachas and chidushim from those little lines. And I don't know what the pshat in those lines are. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu, the Medrash says, said to our Kodesh Baruch Hu. But we see, bottom line, that Rabbi Akiva was the biggest of the big, and he is buried at the top of that mountain, and next to him there's only one person buried next to him, and that's Rabbi Moshe Chaim Litzato, the Mesilas Yesharim, who lived one day short of 40 years. And they said he was the neshama of Rabbi Akiva, and he was Mesakin the first 39 years that Rabbi Akiva didn't learn, and he started at 40 to learn that the Mesilas Yesharim was Mesakin those 39 years, and that's why he lived exactly 39 full years, and the day before the 40th he was Nifter. And he is the only one buried right next to Rabbi Akiva. So we see how big all of them were, and the tikkun, and as it says in Sifrei Kabbalah, that the 24,000 that were nifter by Shevet Shimon in the plague by Bilam and that whole story with Midyan, those 24,000 were the ones who were nisgalgal into these 24,000 Talmidim, and through their Petira they had their tikkun for that inyan of why they died at that point from Shevet Shimon. Now, I want to say to you that this week's parsha is Parshas Bechukotai, the final Sedra of Vayikra, and in unison, as I always say to you when it comes to a parsha of Chazak, that we stand up in unison and say out loud and to each other, Chazak, Chazak, v'nis chazek, which Be'ezras Hashem we will do this Shabbos. And it is Shabbos Mevarchim HaChodesh, Chodesh Sivan, which is the siyum, says the Arizal, of the 4 Chadoshim of Chesed, which go Adar, Nisan, Iyar, and Sivan, and then we go into 6 weeks of Din, which is a very hard time for Klal Yisrael, the Chodesh of Tammuz, and 2 weeks of Av, and then we come to Chamisha Asar Be'Av, which is a day which it's Mahapach back to Chesed, says the Arizal, from the 15th day of Av, that the Mishnah says, Lo hoyu b'Yisrael yomim toivim kachamisha asar ba'av v'chiyom haKippurim. And it's a very special day, and it's these 6 weeks, and that's how we have 2 Chorbanos Bais Rishon, Bais Sheni, the Maisa Ha'egel, the golden calf. All these things happen in these 6 weeks of Tammuz and Av. But meantime, Sivan Haba Aleinu L'Toiva continues to be a chodesh of Kula Chesed. Now, Parshas Bechukotai has in it the Tochacha. The Baal Shem Tov used to be the Balkoire in his shul, and it says that they used to pick the sickest person in the shul to give the aliyah of Tochacha to when the Baal Shem Tov was reading the Tochacha. Why was that? Because in most shuls, either the Balkoire takes it himself, or they lane it without any aliyah, but it's curses, it's klalas, but in shoirish, in its root, it's bracha. So when the Baal Shem Tov used to lane the toichacha, he was able to be masig all the brachos that were in it, and when the sick person came up and got the aliyah, the Baal Shem Tov was reading into him the brachos, and he walked off after the aliyah healed. The Mezritcher Magid used to talk a lot about it. The Reb Levi Yitzchak Barditchev used to talk about that. The Noam Elimelech used to speak about how the Baal Shem Tov was able to be merapah, to heal people that were deathly sick by laning the toichacha to them. But most Balei Kriya are not like the Baal Shem Tov, so they are not masig what the power is in each pasuk, so therefore we avoid, because on surface it looks like klolos on the surface. And there is a sefer from Siach Eliezer that he goes through the entire Tochacha, pasuk by pasuk, and he's masbir how it is a bracha. He was a great grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, and he explained each and every pasuk and how big it was. Now, I want to say to you that at the end of the entire discussion of the Tochacha, there is a segment towards the end of the Sedra that talks about Erechin. Erechin was if somebody got up and said that I want to promise the value of something to the Beis HaMikdash. He could have said the value of a wagon full of tavua, or he could have said somebody, human being's value, how much he would be evaluated to be worth. And that was the amount that he wanted to give as a donation to the actual Beis HaMikdash. And that was called the Parsha. There's a Masechta Erechin. Now, there is a pasuk, and it's a short pasuk, by Shvi, that says, Kol cherem asher yocharam min ha'adam lo yipodeh mos yumas. Now, Rashi, on this pasuk, said, because if most people don't know what this pasuk's talking about, I mean, according to Kol yocharam, that like any value, asher yochram, that min ha'adam, from a man, lo yipodeh, we should not redeem it, like the halachas of Erechin, that if somebody said, and then he wants to back out, or we want to change something, so he has a way to back out of the driveway, so to speak, of this halacha of Erechin. But if it came to a man, he shouldn't do it, and the man should die. What is this talking about? So Rashi says that Hayoitzer lehoreg v'amar echad erko alai. that if they were taking somebody out for the death penalty, that means they were don him, the Bezdin was don him lemisa, that there was something he did that violated some halacha and it required, in other words, the man unfortunately was now going to be put to death. And as they're taking, Rashi says, as they're taking the person out to be executed, somebody stands up and says that man that they're taking out to be executed, I want his value to be given to Kodesh, that it should become Kodesh. So the Rashi says that this pasuk is telling us that when he said Erko Alai, his value, that lo amar klum, he didn't say anything. In other words, it's not that he could take off the nedava, the neder, or that he could redeem him, or any lo yipada, he can't. If he was done to be put to death, he's put to death, and there's no redeeming or erechin involved with this man. Now, the Gemara in Erechin says that a different pshat. That's Rashi's pshat on the pasuk of how we would translate these words. The Gemara in Erechin says this is not the case of what this pasuk means. This pasuk is referring to a plea bargain, that if the guy being taken out to be killed suddenly says, I'm going to give $1 million to the Beis HaMikdash and exempt me from being killed. Or he says, I will redo, the Meforshim say, the Lishkas Hagozes, that he'll redo something in the Beis HaMikdash which was very valuable, so that the pasuk tells you if he was already judged to be put to death, that's what's going to happen to him. Not, you can't have a plea bargain or try to get out of the Misa in any which way. So the pasuk is telling us that there is no such thing, any type of restriction on the death penalty. Now the Ramban, if you take a look at the Ramban, ala Torah, he goes very deep, he disagrees with both pshatim of Rashi and what the Gemara says, and he holds that this is talking about, this pasuk is teaching us that that Kol Melech B'Yisrael O Sanhedria Gedola, that the Rishus B'Mishpotim, and he talks ba'arichas. What does that mean? The Ramban holds this pasuk as telling us that if a melech wants to put a cherem on an issue, he's allowed to do so, and if indeed he does it and somebody wants to negate it, so you should know that the din mishpat of moves, of death, that the melech or Sanhedrin is able to do so. And they could make a cherem on something. And that's why the Ramban says that when Shaul HaMelech went out to fight the Pelishtim, he gave out a decree as Melech that no one that day that they go out to fight should eat. They should all fast. Now his son, Yona's son, didn't know of this new decree. His father, the Melech, did, and he ate honey. And when they told Shaul HaMelech that he ate honey, in other words, he didn't fast, he was going to kill him. He was going to kill his son. That's in Yehoshua. You could take a look at, in Tanakh, you take a look at it. At the end, he didn't get killed, but the idea, where was the heter for Shaul HaMelech to do such a thing? So says the Ramban, it comes from this pasuk, Kol cherem asher yocharam min ha'adam lo yipoda mos yumos, because he has a din of being myriad b'malchus, and that, says the Ramban, is the same story with Yehoshua. When Yehoshua came in to conquer Eretz Yisrael, the first place that he came was to Yericho. And he told everyone that there's a cherem. Now normally to the victor is the spoils. And in other places where they conquered the Lamed Aleph Malachim, they were able to take the booty and the spoils and the money and whatever they wanted. But when it came to this first place, Yehoshua, as like a din melech, because he was like the head of Klal Yisrael, that he didn't want anyone to take anything. And as a matter of fact, there was one guy named Achan who did take, and they killed him. He was put to death. And says the Arizal, that when we say Aleinu every day 3 times at the end of davening, that it has the power in it, like when Yehoshua came around Yericho and 7 times encircled the city, and when it came a point that they finished saying what they were saying, they said Aleinu, that the walls of the city sunk in, they came down, and they were able to attack it, and they were able to conquer it. So says the Arizal, when we say Aleinu, Al Kain Nekave. See, the Lashon of Nusach Ashkenaz is only Al Kain Nekave. Sfard says Ve'al Kain. But the Nusach Ashkenaz is more understandable of what the Arizal says, because Al Kain Nekave, the first 3 letters of those words, is Ochan. And says Al Kain Nekave. Ochan. And says the Arizal that when Klal Yisrael says Aleinu, we're being misaken the pagam that this Achan did and why he was put to death. It made a tremendous, it was the first city in Eretz Yisrael, and Yehoshua gave a cherem, like it was like kodesh. No one was allowed to touch anything in the city, and this guy filled his pockets and left, and they were done him, lemisa, that he was judged, and he ended up dying. So the Ramban says that we have this pshat in this pasuk. This pasuk that we're discussing, Kol cherem asher yocharam min ha'adam lo yipada mos yumos, is going on the cherem that a melech and that Sanhedrin have the right to be able to impose. Now, the Chassam Sofer says no Navi had the right to make a takana that someone should die. In other words, there were takanas, they told them certain things to do, not to do, but if it was violated, they had no power to be able to put somebody to death. It had to be written in the Torah, in the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, that the person for this and that. But says the Ramban that this pasuk was the heter for a melech and for Sanhedrin to come up with a takana, and that they could impose even a death penalty. And all of the kings were, if you look at the parsha of Melech B'Yisrael, there's nothing written there in Parsha Shoftim that he has a right to put on and give a death penalty. But says the Ramban, because of this pasuk, he was able to impose a death penalty, and it had to be paskined if it was a myriad b'malchus or not. Like we know that that Shimi ben Gera, that when he ran into a city to be saved because David HaMelech had told Shloimeh that after he dies he wants him to take revenge because he was a myriad b'malchus and to kill him. And we know that Shlomo devised a way of killing him because his father David didn't want just to take a sword and to kill him. So he said that you have to remain in Yerushalayim the rest of your life, and if you step out of Yerushalayim, you're going to be killed. And two of his avodim, the Navi says, ran away out of Yerushalayim, and Shimi ben Gera went to catch him, catch the two avodim. And he went out of Yerushalayim, and then Shlomo HaMelech said, "You're a dead man." So he ran off to a city, and Rashi says the city was a walled city, and they didn't know what to do. Did they have to give him out and let him be killed? Or did they have to they were being threatened that they would kill the whole city if they didn't give him out? So, so at the end of the story, there was an Isha Zakena who was Serach Bas Osher, who was already 800 years old because of a bracha from her Zayda Yaakov Avinu, and she was the daughter of Osher, and she was still living in the time of David HaMelech, and she paskined for them the halacha, and they gave him out over the wall, and they knew that he would end up being killed because that's what Shlomo HaMelech wanted to do. So we see, says the Ramban, that this inyan of being myriad ben malchus, that the melech and that the Sanhedrin had the power and the koyach to put someone to death. Nebuch. I guess not Nebuch, that was the halacha. Now, after this pasuk, the next pasuk in Bechukotai says v'chol masar ha'oretz, and all of the meiser Now, I'm sorry, it's two psukim later. V'chol masar bakor v'tzon, kol asher yavor tachas hashavet ho asiri yiyeh kodesh l'Hashem. In other words, this idea of having a flock of cattle, and that when they took the rod, that's the shevet, that they took the rod and they touched each animal, and when it came, they counted, and when they got to 10, that 10th one was kodesh l'Hashem, given to the Beis Hamikdash for korbanos, given to the kohanim, and that is what that pasuk says. Now, there is a taich from Kadmoinim who say v'chol masar, that the word v'chol is v'chulam yadu lama ma'asar meis akiva shehoya roya bakar v'tzon, that they all knew why Rabbi Akiva, who was a roya, a shepherd of Bakar Vitzon Kol Asher Yavor Tachas HaShovet, that every one of the Shivtei Ko died in place, every one of the Asara Haruge Malchus died in place of a Shevet, because if you sell, I've said it to you in this year, if you kidnap someone but you don't sell them, then you're over a law of kidnapping. But if you kidnapped and you sold the person, you're chayav misa. So the Shivtei Ko went and sold their brother Yosef. So why weren't they killed right after this story? So the Zohar Kodesh asks that question and answers that the Shivtei Ko were so high and holy, there was no oifan, there was no chayas hakodesh, there was no malach, and there was no srofim that had the power to impose a death penalty on the Shivtei Ko. So they had to be niskalgol to all of, they were reincarnated 1600 years later in the Shivtei Ko, in the Tanoim, and they were each put to death. And that, says the Arizal, is the reason that Rebbe Elazar Reb Hyrcanus was never killed. He was walking the streets, and the Romans never grabbed. They grabbed the others. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai and his son had to go into hiding into the Ma'ora and stay there for 12 years, and they came out and they had to go back in for another year. So everyone else though was killed of those 10 in place of the Shivtei Ko. So why wasn't Rebbe Elazar Reb Hyrcanus also killed? He lived at the same time and he was walking the streets and they never bothered him. Says the Arizal, because Rebbe Elazar Reb Hyrcanus was the neshama of Ruvain. And Ruvain was not there by the Mechira. He went home for Kibbutz Av, and he went home for to do tshuva on the fact that he had switched the beds after Rochel Imenu was nifter. So he wasn't touched. But Kol Asher Yavor Tachas HaShovet, that every one of them of the Shvatim, Shovet, Ho'asiri, but Rabbi Akiva, who was the 10th who was killed, Yeh Kodesh Lashem, because Rabbi Akiva was from Gerim. So why would he be he wasn't a Gilgul from one of the Shivtei Ko, but as it says that the Shvatim only had, because Rabbi Binyamin wasn't there, and Ruvain wasn't there, so they needed a minion, so they were Mitzaref HaKodesh Baruch Hu. And so Kaviyachal HaKodesh Baruch Hu needed a kapara also. So since he needed a kapara, Rabbi Akiva was killed, and that's why he Yatzasa Nishmaso Be'echad, because he was mechuven keneged echad yochid umeyuchad, keneged HaKodesh Baruch Hu, who needed a kapara for joining into the minyan to sell Yosef. And as I told you once, they sold him for 20 silver coins, and the 20 silver coins, they bought shoes, and that's why we on Yom Kippur do not wear shoes. Has nothing to do with Avelis of Tisha B'Av or somebody sitting Shiva. That if they, on Yom Kippur, we don't wear shoes. It's Yom Tiv. It's not a day of Avelis. Tisha B'Av is a day of Avelis. But Yom Kippur is a Yom Tiv Kodesh Kadoshim, the biggest of the big. And that's the reason from last week's Seder, which I did not speak. We took an old tape from many years before, why the pasuk says B'Yom HaKippurim Taviru shofar b'chol artzachem, and right before it says b'yom HaKippurim. If it says the 10th day of Tishrei, we know it's Yom Kippur. That it's Yovel. See, Yovel does not begin in a Yovel year until Yom Kippur. Because just like Klal Yisrael goes out as avodim to Averos, that we're avodim to our Yetzer Hara, so too Motzoi Yom Kippur, all the avodim went free. And to show that it's the same thing as Yom Kippur and the inyan of Yovel, therefore it doesn't start with Rosh Hashanah. In other words, when we have a Shemitah year, the Shemitah begins with Rosh Hashanah. It's the new year and that's it. But by Yovel it didn't start, even though, and to show that all these psukim, we don't say it on Yom Kippur in Musaf, but on Rosh Hashanah we say all those 10 psukim in Musaf, in the Shemona Esrei. And by Malchios, Zichronos, and Shofros, we say 3 from Nevi'im, and 3 from Ksuvim, and 3 from Torah. We say different psukim. But on Yom Kippur, we never say that. But on the year that it became Yovel, we do say it. And we have Tekiyah Shofar like on Rosh Hashanah to show that the year of Yovel is now beginning, and it has in many aspects the inyone of Rosh Hashanah, inyonim. But that was from last week's Sedra, but our Sedra right here, that Ho'asiri Yiyah Kodesh Lashem, that the 10th was Kodesh Keneged Echad Yochad Umiyuchad HaKodesh Baruch Hu. Now, the pasuk in our Sedra says, V'nasati gishmeichem be'itam, and Rashi brings that's Leili Shabbosos, that it's Friday night, that when it rains on a Friday night, it's Gishmei Bracha. And the Meforshim and Rashi say, why is that Gishmei Bracha? Because since a farmer, and most people in those days were farmers, and if, let's say, there was something they forgot to do, I forgot to take in this or that before Shabbos, he couldn't go out, it was Shabbos. He had to leave it. So why is the rain the Gishmei Bracha? Because since on Friday night, a farmer had to come with his full emunah, just like on Shavuos. In order for a person to hold back on Shabbos and not do this, it's one day. If he forgot to lock the door to his barn or something, he can pull through the 24 hours and run out and do it after Shabbos. If a person on Pesach is told you can't eat chametz and he loves something, he'll pull through the 7-8 days. But by Shemitah, he had to wait a whole year. He had to sit there. Everything, even a cucumber was kodesh, and if the animals came to eat in the field, they were able to eat. And people, aniyim, that wanted to come and take fruit, they couldn't plant or sow or shower or anything, the process, or harvest anything that had to remain untouchable for the owner. But strangers could come in and eat. Could you imagine this owner of the field sitting for 7 years, for the 7th year, for Shemitah, watching people come in to his field, the wild animals and everything else, and he had to sit there, and this was the field that he used to sweat and work and produce and sow and harvest and everything that he had to do to have his parnasa. But he had to exhibit complete emunah, that he'll be with enough to eat, v'tzivisi Hashem es habracha b'shana hashishis, that he had the full blessing and the full bracha. so too Leile Shabbosos, the person had to have that same type of restraint and emunah that everything was going to be wonderful. So the emunah came to full flourish Friday night. That means no matter what he forgot to do or he had to do, he couldn't go out to the field and exercise any activity whatsoever on the field, and he had to just sit there and enjoy with his full emunah that everything was going to be super, super wonderful. Now, the pasuk also says right after that, "V'nosati shalom ba'oretz," and it says 2 psukim later again the inyan of shalom. So the Mefarshim basically say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was saying that the key to everything is shalom. That's why we finish benching with sim shalom. It's the last bracha, hamavorech esamo Yisrael b'shalom, and in benching, that's Shemona Esrei, and in benching Hashem Yevorech esamo v'shalom, that this whole inyan of shalom, it brings about the hatzlocha that a person has in his lifetime, in his parnasa, in his tranquility, in his shalom bayis, that's the cementing factor. And the Gemara says that sarach lahafsiya gimel psios acharov v'achar kach shalom, that a person, when he finishes, the Gemara says in brachas, that when a person finishes saying Shemona Esrei, he has to take 3 steps back, and then he could say Osa Shalom Bimromav. So the Mefarshim and the Gemara say, what does this mean? It means that when a person, every person has some ego and has some positions of principle, that they feel, oh, you know, if they did this and that, I wouldn't even mind. But this, oh no, I'm a person of principle. The other guy did this and that. I'm not talking to him the rest of my life. I'm not dealing with him. I'm not. So what the Gemara means when it says he has to take back 3 steps, like we do when we finish Shemona Esrei, which means basically that somebody that you feel ba'avled you, and that you justifiably and you have every rationale and reason to take your position and stand firm in how you feel, you have to break out of that mode and step back from that position. You should not live your life with cheshbonis against this one and against that one, and this happened and that happened. They didn't give me shishi and shul. They didn't give me this. And then you have to break up a whole family, that your wife has her friends for 25 years and the children have friends. And oh no, you're not stepping again into that shul. Yeah. Why? Because either your kavod or your gaiva or your ego, whatever it is, destroy a whole everything because of that position. Tzarech lahafsiya gimel psios, that you have to back off 3 steps, and then you say Osa Shalom, then the Shalom will come. But you first have to break out of that mode, and you have to realize that you cannot stand firm in an area where really you should be giving in. Comes Erev Yom Kippur, make up with the guy, forget it, put the year and everything bad behind you, and move into the new mode of having pure shalom. So that's how the Mefarshim teach, that after all the brachas are said before the tochacha, it says if you'll keep the Torah and you'll do this and you'll do that, then v'nosati shalom ba'aretz, then I will give you tranquility and shalom, the thing, and you will come and see all the brachas that I promised you. But if there's no shalom, you're not getting all the brachas. Because that is the yesod hayesodos of how brachas come to Klal Yisrael when there is shalom. And for a person's own sanctity and his own position going through life, the 70, 80, 90 years fly by, and half of his life he's not talking to this one, he's not this, he's not that. He should give him because it'll bring an inner tranquility. That's why the Arizal says before a person begins davening, he's supposed to talk about V'yahavta l'reach hakamocha. In the Nusach Hari Sidurim, before you begin in the morning, Matovu, that it talks over there about Avos Yisrael. Because when you remove all these obstacles, you're able to bring to fruition the dignity and the full flourish of inner peace. And that's why Tzarech Lahavsia Gimel Pesios. So I want to wish each and every one of you that there should be this madrega of allowing yourself to budge out of the firm mode, M-O-D-E, that you put yourself into. And oh yeah, you have friends in shul. There's 600 people in shul. I'm friends with everyone. But that guy, that's your test. Try to find a way to remove that barrier and that obstacle. Have a guten chodesh, haba aleinu letoiva, and the Rabbanu Shalom should grant us the matana, the beautiful matana of the Torah, and that we should be able to have that matana flourish within, and that becomes the biggest shield and protective shield. For instance, in Eretz Yisrael, you want to do something for Eretz Yisrael, you don't have to say, oh, what can I do? I'm here, I'm not fighting in the front line and maybe giving up my life for Klal Yisrael or for the peace and the protection of Eretz Yisrael and Klal Yisrael. But sitting here in Borough Park or in Los Angeles or wherever you are, that by learning an extra Blat Gemara or an extra Perek Mishnayos, you are providing another grenade to protect a group of Yidden. By that Perek Mishnayos, by that extra $1 of tzedakah every single day, the only mitzvah that it says, Tatzil Mimoves and Mevi Geula, is by tzedakah. It doesn't say it by Shabbos, it doesn't say it by Tefillin, but it's Tatzil Mimoves. So when someone takes $1 and hands it to the Oni, and he does it with a smile, so it's not a limping mitzvah, but it's a mitzvah that's able to go into full force and effect. If Chazal say Tatzil Mimoves, it's Tatzil Mimoves. So we want to save another 3 soldiers that day. Give the $1 or $2 and have in mind the Yiddish and the Neshamas who are in the front line. In there itself, the Chazal say, Tatzil Mimoves. And we should be able to see the Geula Shlema, Bimheira V'yameinu. Amen.